As we all know, 200 and some years, water has always been the problem. Well, now we're encountering it ourselves, and we have to devise a way to shut it down or at least diminish it. The bottom of the garden shaft could be incredibly important to solving the mystery. It needs to be dealt with.
In the next few minutes, you're going to hear about a discovery on Oak Island that could change everything we thought we knew about its 200-year-old treasure mystery. For generations, treasure hunters have searched the island, drilled through its soil, followed forgotten maps, and chased clues that always seemed to lead somewhere, but never quite to the treasure itself. Until now. Because, for the first time, one researcher claims to have pinpointed a precise location where the legendary treasure may still be hidden. Her name is Emma Culligan. And what she uncovered wasn't just another theory. It was an extraordinary alignment between old symbols, historical survey markers, and underground scans, all pointing toward one untouched location on the island, a place no one had ever excavated. If her interpretation is correct, this could be the clue Oak Island researchers have been searching for centuries. So stay with us, because what happened next may be one of the most intriguing discoveries in the island's history. And before we uncover what Emma found beneath the ground, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring you more incredible mysteries, forgotten history, and discoveries from around the world. Now, let's go back to the morning Emma Culligan stepped onto Oak Island. The moment Emma stepped onto Oak Island, something felt different. The wind that had battered the team for weeks had almost disappeared. Instead, an unsettling silence settled over the island, as though the entire place had gone still to watch what happened next. Rick Lagina noticed it immediately. Emma didn't step out of the truck like someone arriving to begin another search. There was no hesitation in her movements, no uncertainty in her expression. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already found the answer, and had returned only to prove it. Rick had watched countless experts come to Oak Island over the years. Archaeologists, engineers, historians, researchers, treasure hunters, all arriving with theories and possibilities. But Emma was different. She wasn't behaving like someone searching for a clue. She looked like someone who already knew where the clue would lead. A heavy layer of morning fog hovered over the swamp. It moved slowly across the water and mud, swallowing the surrounding sounds and giving the island an eerie, almost timeless atmosphere. As Emma walked toward the center of the swamp, the mist wrapped around her boots. Rick followed closely behind. In Emma's hands were decades of Oak Island survey maps, the same maps Rick had studied for years, maps that had become part of the island's legendary history. But Emma wasn't studying them the way everyone else had. She ignored the obvious markings. Instead, her attention kept returning to faint lines, strange shapes, and shaded areas that previous researchers had barely considered. Whenever her fingers stopped on one particular detail, Rick felt that familiar sensation in his chest. It was the feeling he had experienced countless times before, those moments when he believed they might finally be standing at the edge of something extraordinary. Only this time, the feeling was different. For years, Oak Island had seemed stubbornly silent. Now it felt alive. Almost as if something beneath the mud and water was finally beginning to reveal itself. The legendary treasure that had haunted generations of searchers, the fortune rumored to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, suddenly seemed less like an old story and more like something dangerously close. Far too close. Emma eventually stopped near the center of the swamp. She lowered herself to the ground and pressed a gloved hand into the damp earth. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she gave a small nod. It was the reaction of someone who had just confirmed something she had already suspected. She motioned for the others to come closer. Then her equipment came alive. A soft electronic ping broke the silence. On the display, a faint irregularity appeared beneath the swamp floor. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. Rick immediately narrowed his eyes. He had seen strange readings before, false positives, equipment glitches, natural formations, and unexplained anomalies that ultimately turned out to be nothing. But this signal felt different. Emma changed the scanning frequency and ran the equipment across the area again. This time, the image became much clearer. The density beneath the swamp wasn't behaving like ordinary compressed soil. It didn't resemble normal sediment, and it didn't fit the geological pattern expected beneath a naturally formed wetland. Instead, the scan suggested something far more unusual, a layer of earth that appeared to have been intentionally compressed and arranged, a structure hidden beneath centuries of mud. Rick stared at the screen. Then Emma moved the scanner again. The image sharpened, and suddenly the entire team went silent. A shape began to emerge beneath the swamp. Straight lines, defined corners, balanced angles, and most importantly, a void. It didn't resemble the irregular shape of a natural cave. It didn't twist like an erosion pocket. It didn't taper away like a geological fracture. The geometry was too clean, too deliberate. It looked engineered. Emma stared at the display before finally speaking. "This isn't natural," she paused. "Someone built this?" Nobody immediately responded. There was no burst of celebration, no shouting, no wild excitement. Instead, the team exchanged uneasy looks. Because after decades of false leads and disappointing scans, this reading looked unlike anything they had encountered before. This wasn't simply another suspicious signal. It appeared to be a structure, a design, something deliberately constructed beneath the island. Rick stepped toward the screen, studying every line. His jaw tightened. His hands shook slightly. What they were seeing didn't look like a random underground anomaly. It looked almost like a blueprint. A carefully engineered chamber, a hidden vault, and a structure like that raises a much more important question. Why would someone go to such extraordinary lengths to build it? Whatever had been placed inside would have had to be valuable enough, or dangerous enough, to justify hiding it from anyone who might come searching centuries later. Emma wasn't backing away from the discovery. If anything, her confidence grew. She looked at the others and pointed toward the center of the scan. "This is the heart of the island." There was no hesitation in her voice. No, maybe. No, possibly. She spoke with absolute certainty, but the scan wasn't the only evidence Emma had brought with her. She opened another file on her tablet, then another. Ancient Templar schematics began appearing across the screen. Medieval storage designs, underground vault configurations, hidden entrances, collapsible chambers, and tunnel systems designed to divert anyone attempting to reach the central structure. Emma began comparing those historical designs with the underground scan from Oak Island. Then she overlaid the two. The room became completely silent. The angles appeared to correspond. The proportions were remarkably similar. Even the measurements of the underground void appeared close to the dimensions shown in the historical designs. Emma explained that medieval Templar vaults were sometimes believed to incorporate deceptive layers of soil and hidden entrances, making it difficult for anyone searching from above to identify the actual access point. And if a similar strategy had been used here, then the swamp might not be hiding the treasure at all. It might be hiding the entrance to something much deeper, something deliberately designed to remain undiscovered. The reason, Emma explained, was simple but remarkably clever. By constructing sealed chambers beneath waterlogged ground, the builders could take advantage of the swamp itself. The constant moisture could help preserve wooden structures, slow natural decay, and make unauthorized excavation extremely difficult. As Emma explained this, something suddenly clicked in Rick's mind. He remembered a story his father had once told him. It had been one of those strange stories passed down through the family, a half-forgotten tale, told over drinks, about a hidden underground chamber somewhere beneath the swamp. According to the story, early treasure hunters believed an important object had been concealed there. Rick had never taken it seriously. To him, it was simply another piece of Oak Island folklore, the kind of story that gets exaggerated every time it's passed from one generation to the next. But now, staring at Emma's data, he began wondering whether that old family story had contained a fragment of something real. Emma wasn't finished. She brought up another document on her tablet, the controversial Nova Scotia map showing a supposed Templar route. For years, historians had dismissed parts of the map as unreliable. Emma zoomed in on one particular section. There was a missing marker near Oak Island, a tiny symbol that had long been attributed to a cartographer's error. But Emma didn't believe it was an error. She placed the historical marker over the new coordinates, and suddenly the pieces began to fall into place. The tunnel directions, the position of the underground chamber, the location of the swamp, even the surrounding geometry. Everything appeared to converge on the same design, a design that, according to Emma, had been hiding in plain sight for centuries. Then she revealed something even more disturbing. The chamber wasn't necessarily constructed simply to store gold. Emma believed it could have served a much more important purpose: a repository, a sealed archive, a protected storage chamber designed to preserve documents, artifacts, or information that its creators never intended ordinary people to discover. Rick stared at her. If that interpretation was correct, then the team might not be standing above a treasure worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They could be standing above something far more significant: a vault containing evidence capable of changing the accepted history of North America. A structure deliberately engineered, carefully concealed, and buried beneath a landscape that naturally protected it from human interference. For the first time in decades, the Oak Island mystery didn't feel like an old legend to Rick. It felt physical, measurable, reachable. Emma walked over to the map table without saying a word. She unfolded a transparent sheet and placed it directly over the underground scans. Rick leaned closer. As Emma adjusted the projection, lines began appearing across the display. But these weren't construction lines. They formed arcs, circles, and intersecting angles that seemed to have something to do with the sky. Astronomical geometry. Emma tapped the center of the model. The display changed. The modern landscape disappeared, replaced by a reconstruction of the night sky as it would have appeared over Oak Island in the year 1347. Rick watched closely. The swamp coordinates suddenly aligned with an invisible axis extending toward the north. Emma rotated the projection, then she stopped. Polaris appeared directly above the precise location they had just identified. The position wasn't approximate. According to Emma's model, it matched with astonishing mathematical precision. The coordinate wasn't simply a point on a map. It appeared to have been connected to the night sky. Emma explained that, according to her theory, certain Templar vault systems weren't designed around obvious surface landmarks. Their entrances, tunnels, and secondary chambers could have been encoded through celestial positioning. And without knowing which historical sky configuration the builders had used, later explorers would have been searching in the wrong place from the beginning. Emma demonstrated this by running the model through different centuries. The sky shifted. The stars slowly moved relative to the Earth's changing orientation. And as the timeline advanced, The original alignment began drifting away from the Oak Island coordinate. Rick watched the separation grow, a few meters, then more. Emma pointed out the significance. Every major excavation on the island had been based on modern astronomical calculations. None had reconstructed the exact historical sky that would have existed when the supposed system was created. That tiny difference could have been enough to ruin an excavation. A tunnel could miss its target by only a few meters. A shaft could collapse. A drilling operation could trigger flooding. And what investigators had interpreted as random failures might actually have been the predictable result of starting from an incorrect coordinate. Then Emma reversed the timeline. Back to the 14th century. The projection shifted. The stars moved into position, and suddenly the geometry locked together. A triangular pattern appeared across the display. 3 lines converged. All of them pointed toward one final location, the exact location Emma had identified. Rick couldn't speak. The realization was overwhelming. If Emma's interpretation was correct, she hadn't simply discovered another clue. She had potentially connected centuries of maps, failed excavations, underground structures, and astronomical references into a single system. The island itself hadn't changed. The swamp hadn't moved. The supposed vault had remained hidden. What had changed was the way they were looking at it. And that new perspective suddenly made decades of failed searches look very different. The team didn't waste time. They took the newly calculated coordinates and returned to the swamp. A probe was positioned over the target. Then it broke through the surface. The instrument disappeared into the dark water and began descending through the mud. But almost immediately, the team noticed something unusual. The material felt denser, thicker, almost resistant to the probe. Then bubbles began rising toward the surface, slowly, steadily, almost rhythmically. Marty crouched beside the water and watched them carefully. "This isn't behaving like normal mud," he said. The bubbles appeared to be coming from below rather than simply forming naturally at the surface. Marty studied the pattern. "It feels like pressure is equalizing," he said, "like we've opened something that's been sealed for centuries." The team went silent. Emma remained remarkably calm. She had expected a reaction like this. According to her theory, the builders could have used hydraulic pressure as part of the concealment system. Waterlogged layers could hide entrances, while pressure helped keep the chamber sealed and protected. If that was what they were seeing, then the bubbling wasn't necessarily a danger. It could be evidence that the probe had reached something enclosed beneath the swamp. Then the gas began to disperse. And another detail caught Rick's attention. A faint smell drifted upward, earthy, woody, ancient. But strangely, it didn't smell rotten. Rick noticed it first. He looked toward Marty. Marty immediately understood what he was thinking. The scent reminded them of old timber preserved without oxygen for an extraordinary length of time. Wood that hadn't simply decayed and disappeared. Wood that might have remained protected beneath the swamp for centuries. They exchanged a silent look, because now they weren't simply probing mud anymore. They might have reached the environment created by the original builders themselves. And as the probe continued downward, the signal became clearer. Whatever was beneath them wasn't behaving like ordinary swamp sediment. Something was down there. And for the first time, they were getting dangerously close to finding out what it was. The probe continued downward. The soft layers of sediment slowly disappeared, replaced by something much more resistant. Emma watched the pressure readings carefully. The material could have been densely packed clay, or perhaps the remains of a retaining structure. Then another strange detail appeared. The surface of the swamp began behaving differently. Tiny ripples spread across the water in patterns that looked almost geometric. For a moment, it no longer felt like they were standing over an ordinary swamp. It felt as though the swamp was merely a disguise, a natural-looking layer covering something deliberately constructed beneath it. Emma stared at the readings. Her expression became more focused. One by one, the predictions she had made from the astronomical model were appearing in the physical data. The celestial geometry appeared to determine the location. The swamp itself seemed to conceal the structure, and the pressure beneath the water appeared to help preserve it. 3 separate systems, all reacting at the same time. Emma stepped away from the equipment and opened another data set on her tablet. This time she brought up seismic records from previous deep excavations. Normally, the scans looked chaotic. Oak Island's geology was fractured and complicated, producing countless irregular signals. But Emma applied the new coordinates to the existing data. Something unexpected happened. The noise began to organize itself. The pattern wasn't centered around a single underground cavity. It appeared to extend outward, branching. Emma adjusted the filters and removed some of the lower frequency interference. Slowly, a new structure began emerging from the screen. A long descending disturbance stretched away from the chamber they had already identified. Rick moved closer. His breathing became shallow. This wasn't another random geological pocket. It wasn't an ordinary water channel, and it didn't resemble a natural crack. The feature was remarkably straight, consistent, linear, almost perfectly engineered. Emma isolated the signal and began measuring its angle. Then she compared it with historical underground structures. The slope was remarkably similar to the angled tunnels found in medieval Portuguese fortifications. Emma explained that tunnels of this kind could serve more than one purpose. They could provide protected storage for valuable materials while also functioning as emergency escape routes for those responsible for guarding the repository. Rick had encountered hundreds of supposed tunnel signals during his years on Oak Island. Most had eventually turned out to be natural formations, cracks filled with silt, water pathways, broken geological layers. But this signal behaved differently. Its response was smooth, regular, almost rhythmic. It produced a resonance that didn't look natural. Rick stared at the display. "That's a tunnel." Emma continued following it deeper. And then something became even more unusual. The structure didn't simply disappear into the surrounding geology, as most underground cavities eventually did. Instead, it gradually curved, and that curve appeared to follow the same directional geometry established by the Polaris alignment. The astronomical model and the underground structure were pointing in the same direction. Then, the team saw something that made everyone stop. Approximately 40 feet beyond the primary chamber, another signal appeared. This one was rectangular, and the return was significantly stronger than the signals associated with wood or compacted clay. The material appeared much denser. Stone. Emma stopped the scan. She enlarged the image. This wasn't a pile of collapsed masonry. It wasn't random rubble. The edges were too straight, the corners too sharp, the geometry too precise. Then the outline became clear. A door, a stone door, and according to the scan, it appeared to remain intact beneath centuries of water and sediment. Rick felt a cold sensation run through him.